This video contains sensitive content related to infidelity and explores complex emotional themes. The following story is based on a true-life experience, though all names and identifying details have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved. Viewer discretion is advised. Hey everyone, before we begin, if you're interested in stories about relationships, betrayal, and the messy realities of life, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow, and I appreciate your support. Where do I even begin? It's hard to talk about this even now, years later. It feels like opening a wound that never fully healed. My name is Tameka, or at least, it is now. For a long time, I was Mrs. Terrence Ammons. We were, or I thought we were, happy. We had a comfortable life, a beautiful home, 2 wonderful kids. On the surface, everything looked perfect, like a picture postcard. The kind you see in magazines, the kind you envy. But beneath the surface, things were shifting. Subtly at first, so subtly I almost didn't notice. It was like a slow leak, a tiny crack in the foundation that you don't see until the whole structure starts to crumble. Terrence and I, we started drifting apart. Not in a dramatic, explosive way, but in small, almost imperceptible increments. He'd come home late from work more often, his excuses becoming increasingly flimsy. He seemed distant, preoccupied. Like he was somewhere else, even when he was physically present. Like a ghost in our own home. I tried to talk to him about it, of course. I'd bring it up gently, tentatively, afraid of what he might say, afraid of the confirmation of my worst fears. But he'd always brush it off, telling me I was imagining things, that he was just stressed, that work was demanding. The same tired excuses, the same dismissive tone. It made me feel invisible. Like I wasn't even worth his time or attention. And then there was Stephen, my stepson, Terrence's son from his previous marriage. He was 17 at the time, awkward, gangly, going through all the usual teenage angst. He was quiet, mostly kept to himself, spent hours in his room playing video games or listening to music. He wasn't a bad kid, not really, just there, a presence in the house that I barely noticed most of the time. But he was noticing me. I didn't realize it at first. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. A lingering look, a slightly too long pause when our hands brushed, a quiet good morning that seemed to carry more weight than it should. Small things, seemingly innocent things that I didn't pay much attention to at the time. I dismissed them as teenage awkwardness, a boy trying to find his place in the world. Looking back now, I can see the signs. The way he'd always be around when I was in the kitchen, pretending to do homework at the table. The way his eyes followed me across the room. The way he'd offer to help with chores, even the ones I hadn't asked him to do. It was a slow burn, a subtle shift in the atmosphere of the house that I didn't fully comprehend until it was too late. There was one incident, though, that stands out. It was a hot summer day, and I was in the shower, trying to cool down after working in the garden. I'd forgotten my loofah, and I called out to Stephen, asking him to grab it for me. It was a simple request, an everyday occurrence, or so I thought. He brought it to me, hesitating for a moment before pushing the shower door open slightly. I turned, surprised, and for a fleeting second, our eyes met. And in that instant, something shifted. Something unspoken passed between us. A spark, a flicker of something. I don't know what it was, but it was there. He handed me the loofah, his fingers brushing against mine. It was a brief touch, barely perceptible. But it sent a jolt of electricity through me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. A feeling that was both exciting and terrifying. I knew I should pull away, that this was wrong, but I didn't, not immediately. And in that hesitation, in that single frozen moment, everything changed. Everything. The course of my life, my marriage, my family, it all teetered on the edge of a precipice. And I, blinded by my own loneliness and neglect, was about to step off. That moment in the shower, that fleeting touch, it was like a key turning in a lock I didn't even know existed. It unlocked something inside me, something I had buried deep down. A part of me that was starved for attention, for affection, for connection. It wasn't just about physical attraction, although let's be honest, there was that too. Liam was young, vibrant, full of energy. He was everything Terrence wasn't anymore. It started subtly. A shared glance across the dinner table, a whispered joke when Terrence wasn't around. Liam started finding excuses to talk to me, asking for help with his homework, wanting my opinion on music or movies. He listened to me, really listened, in a way that Terrence hadn't for years. He remembered things I'd said weeks ago, details about my day, my feelings, my dreams. He made me feel seen, valued, important. It was intoxicating. Then came the night everything changed. Terrence and I had a terrible fight. The same old argument, recycled and reheated. He came home late, again, smelling of cologne I didn't recognize. I confronted him, and he turned it around on me, accusing me of being jealous, insecure, dramatic. He stormed off to bed, leaving me alone in the living room, feeling empty and defeated. Liam found me there, sitting in the dark, tears streaming down my face. He sat beside me, not saying anything at first, just offering a comforting presence. Then he put his arm around me, tentatively, and I leaned into him. It felt right. In that moment, it felt like the only thing that made sense. He listened to me, his eyes full of concern, his touch gentle and reassuring. He didn't judge me, he didn't criticize me, he just held me. And in that embrace, something shifted. The line we had been dancing around, the unspoken tension that had been building between us, it finally snapped. It wasn't planned, it wasn't even conscious. One moment we were comforting each other, the next, we were kissing. It was a desperate kiss, full of longing and unspoken desires. It wasn't just about sex. It was about connection, about validation, about feeling alive again. It was a mistake. I knew it even as it was happening. But I couldn't stop myself. I didn't want to stop. That night was the beginning, the first crack in the dam that would eventually burst and wash everything away. Over the next 8 months, our affair continued. It wasn't a whirlwind of passionate encounters, although there were those too. Mostly, it was stolen moments, whispered conversations in the kitchen late at night, shared glances across a crowded room, the thrill of a secret connection. Liam became my confidant, my escape, the one person who seemed to understand me. He knew how to make me laugh, how to make me feel beautiful, how to make me feel wanted. Things I hadn't felt in years, but the guilt was always there, gnawing at me, a constant reminder of what I was doing, who I was hurting. I loved Terrence, or at least I thought I did. We had a life together, a family. I knew what I was doing was wrong, that it could destroy everything. But I was addicted to the attention, to the feeling of being desired, to the connection I had with Liam. It was like a drug, and I couldn't bring myself to quit. Liam's obsession intensified over those months. He became more possessive, more demanding. He wanted all of my attention, all of my time. He'd get jealous if I even spoke to another man. It was flattering at first, this intense devotion, but it quickly became suffocating. I started to feel trapped, like I had traded one cage for another. I tried to pull away a few times to end things, but Liam wouldn't let me. He'd manipulate me, guilt-trip me, threaten to tell Terrence everything. And I, riddled with guilt and fear, would always give in. I was caught in a web of my own making, and I couldn't see a way out. I was playing with fire, and I knew I was going to get burned. It was just a matter of time. Intensifies, becoming more possessive and demanding. Includes scenes where Anna tries to pull away, but Liam's emotional manipulation and her own needs draw her back in. The inevitable finally happened. It wasn't a photo, or a whispered conversation overheard, or even a chance encounter. It was something far more intimate, far more devastating. It was a letter. A letter from Liam to me. I had foolishly kept it, hidden away in a box of old photos and mementos, thinking it was safe, thinking no one would ever find it. I was wrong. Terrence found it. He was cleaning out the attic, looking for some old tools, and he stumbled upon the box. He didn't recognize the handwriting, so he opened it. And in that moment, our worlds shattered. The letter was explicit, full of longing and desire, detailing our encounters, our stolen moments, our secret world. It was a confession, a declaration of love, a testament to our betrayal. I wasn't there when he found it. I was at the grocery store, trying to pretend that everything was normal, that my life wasn't a carefully constructed lie. I came home to a scene of devastation. Terrence was sitting in the living room, the letter clutched in his hand, his face white with shock, his eyes filled with a pain I had never seen before. He looked broken. He didn't scream, he didn't yell. He just looked at me, his eyes searching mine, asking a question I couldn't answer. I knew what he was going to say. I knew what he had found. And in that moment, The carefully constructed facade I had built around myself crumbled. "What is this?" he asked. His voice barely a whisper. I couldn't speak. I tried to deny it, to make up some excuse, but the words wouldn't come. The guilt was too much, the weight of my betrayal too heavy to bear. I just stood there, silent, tears streaming down my face. He read the letter aloud, his voice trembling with each word. It was like a knife twisting in my gut. Hearing those words, those intimate details spoken aloud, it made it all so real, so undeniable. I wanted to disappear, to crawl into a hole and never come out. When he finished reading, he looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain, anger, and disbelief. "How could you?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. "How could you do this to me, to us?" I tried to explain, to tell him about the loneliness, the neglect, the emotional void that Liam had filled. But the words sounded hollow, empty, even to my own ears. There was no excuse, no justification for what I had done. I had betrayed him. I had betrayed our family. I had betrayed myself. He didn't say anything else. He just stood up and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with the shattered pieces of our life. The confrontation with Liam was even worse. Terrence called him over, and the three of us sat in the living room, the air thick with tension, the letter lying on the coffee table like a damning piece of evidence. Liam initially denied everything, playing the innocent, the misunderstood teenager. But when Terrence showed him the letter, his facade crumbled too. He didn't apologize, he didn't express remorse. He just sat there, his face a mask of defiance, his eyes filled with a coldness that chilled me to the bone. The argument that followed was brutal, a torrent of accusations, denials, and recriminations. Terrence was furious, his anger raw and visceral. Liam was defensive, trying to shift the blame, to paint me as the seducer, the older woman taking advantage of his innocence. And I just sat there, numb, watching my life unravel before my eyes. The emotional fallout was devastating. The trust was broken, the family shattered. The pain was raw, visceral, a constant ache in my chest. It was like a bomb had gone off, and the shrapnel had ripped through all of us, leaving wounds that would take years to heal, if they ever healed at all. The aftermath, it was like living in a fog, a thick, suffocating fog where everything was distorted, where the familiar landmarks of my life had vanished, leaving me lost and disoriented. The house, once a symbol of our happy family, became a battleground, a constant reminder of my betrayal. Every room echoed with the ghosts of our past, the laughter, the shared meals, the quiet moments of intimacy. Now, it was filled with silence, a heavy, oppressive silence that suffocated me. Terrence moved out. He couldn't bear to be in the same house as me. The same house where I had betrayed him, where I had slept with his son. I didn't blame him. I wouldn't have been able to stand being around me either. He took the kids with him, which was probably for the best. I couldn't face them, not after what I had done. The shame was too much, the guilt too overwhelming. How could I look them in the eye, knowing that I had shattered their world, that I had destroyed the image of their perfect family? I stayed in the house, alone, surrounded by the ghosts of my past. I wandered from room to room, touching the furniture, looking at the photos on the walls, trying to piece together the life I had so carelessly thrown away. I replayed the events of the past 8 months over and over in my head, trying to understand how I had ended up in this situation. How had I become the kind of woman who could betray her husband, who could sleep with her stepson? The regret was all-consuming. It was a physical ache, a constant weight in my chest that made it hard to breathe. I regretted the pain I had caused Terrence, the hurt I had inflicted on my children, the damage I had done to our family. I regretted the lies, the deceit, the stolen moments, the broken trust. I regretted the person I had become. Liam. His future was uncertain. Terrence was furious, understandably so. He wanted to press charges, to make Liam pay for what he had done. But I begged him not to. I knew that wouldn't solve anything, that it would only make things worse for everyone involved. Liam was still a kid, a troubled kid, a kid who had made a terrible mistake. I didn't want to ruin his life, not completely. He was sent to therapy, and I hoped, I prayed, that he would get the help he needed. I never spoke to him again. I couldn't. The thought of facing him, of reliving those moments, was too much to bear. The divorce was messy, as divorces often are. There were lawyers and arguments and accusations. Terrence was cold, distant, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and contempt. He didn't want to talk to me, he didn't want to hear my explanations, my apologies. He just wanted to be done with me, to erase me from his life completely. And I understood. I deserved it. The kids were distant too. They didn't understand what had happened, not really. They just knew that their parents were getting divorced, that their family was broken. They blamed me, of course. I was the one who had destroyed everything, the one who had betrayed their father, the one who had shattered their sense of security. I tried to talk to them, to explain, but they wouldn't listen. They turned away from me, their eyes filled with hurt and resentment. I was alone, completely alone. My husband was gone, my children were estranged, my stepson was a stranger. I had lost everything: my marriage, my family, my sense of self. I was a pariah, a scarlet woman, the woman who had slept with her stepson. The whispers followed me everywhere, the judgmental stares, the hushed conversations. I was a cautionary tale, a symbol of betrayal, a reminder of the devastating consequences of infidelity. Looking back now, years later, I can see things more clearly. I can see the mistakes I made, the choices that led me down this path of destruction. I can see the loneliness, the neglect, the emotional void that I was trying to fill. But that doesn't excuse my actions. It doesn't justify my betrayal. I made a choice, a terrible choice, and I have to live with the consequences. There are no easy answers, no simple resolutions. Infidelity is a complex issue, a tangled web of emotions, desires, and broken promises. It's not just about sex, it's about connection, about validation, about feeling seen and heard. It's about the needs that aren't being met, the voids that are crying out to be filled. And sometimes, in our desperation to find those connections, we make choices that we later regret, choices that can destroy everything we hold dear. I don't expect anyone to understand, to forgive me. I don't even know if I can forgive myself. All I can do is share my story, in the hopes that it might help someone else, someone who is struggling, someone who is feeling lost and alone. Maybe, just maybe, my story can serve as a warning, a reminder of the devastating consequences of infidelity, a cautionary tale about the choices we make and the lives we shatter in the process. And maybe, just maybe, it can help someone else find the courage to seek help, to address the issues in their own relationships before it's too late. Because the pain, the regret, the loneliness, it's a burden I wouldn't wish on anyone. If you found this story impactful, please like this video, subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and share it with anyone who might need to hear it. Your support means a lot.